Welcome, Spartans, to the Podcast Evolve July Book Club. I'm your host, Aaron, and with me this week is Oran.
Hey, everybody.
And Krysta.
It's August.
It's the July Book Club, even if it's August. It's July.
Oh.
Just say hi, Krysta.
Say hi,
What happened
Krysta.
to the June book club?
Shh.
No one likes
Hello.
Escalation Volume 3. Just say hi.
Hi.
And if you're listening, this month's book club, we're talking about the Fall of Reach animated series, because that's a thing we wanted to talk about. So the author and publisher will run through some of the quick details. It's published by 343 and Sequence Animation. It's available streaming and Blu-ray, and it was released on the 27th of October 2015. It's a little over an hour long, and if you're familiar with it, it's the same sort of like motion comic style animation, well, like a slightly improved version of it as to what you get in the terminals for the Master Chief Collection and Halo 4. It's very familiar to those. This in the timeline takes place from about 2517 till about 2525, and the show covers the first, what would we say, about the first third of the Fall of Reach book.
Yeah, sounds about right.
It's very closely, it takes a lot of beats from the novel. If you've read the novel, you should be fairly familiar with it.
I would say it's about half.
I suppose.
Not to get too much into it, but the Covenant come in about halfway in the book.
Probably. So we'll run down a quick, short synopsis of it, because most people are probably pretty familiar with the Fall of Reach at this stage in some
Also
shape
spoilers.
or form. Yes. So this whole animated thing roughly takes place. It starts off with Catherine Halsey as she's going out to visit the outer colonies and keep an eye or check out some children.
Ew.
I'm having trouble with words for some reason. In particular, the person she's away out to look at is a certain young boy called John.
Sounds familiar.
Yes, people might be familiar with him. She goes to a planet, she checks on this kid with a certain Commander Keyes. I think he's Lieutenant Keyes at this stage. And then from there, we cover the abduction of the Spartan candidates. They go over a little history of Halsey's motivations for the program. And then we join the Spartans, specifically the Spartans of Blue Team, as they kind of team up during training and overcome obstacles, and John learns to not be a dick. There's a few things they cover along the way, and then we see the Spartans on their first deployment when they're sent to an asteroid to fight or to kidnap the leader of the insurrection, which, if anyone's familiar with the books, will remember that the Spartans were created to put down the insurrectionists in the outer colonies, and then later a certain enemy appeared, which is revealed in the books as well. This is around the time that Harvest is attacked, and the UNSC get wind of the attack by the Brutes, and then the Spartans get their Mjolnir armor, and we finish off with the first Spartan Covenant engagement. Would that about cover it?
Yep, that's about it.
It's a pretty
Yeah.
short and sweet sort of rundown of it. Like there's a few story beats, but it follows pretty closely to the novel. Like they tie a few little things in together, but it's mostly the novel. So we'll go into it with, what are your thoughts on this? Like, Oran, what did you think of it just generally overall?
So, yeah, just to further clarify, it follows pretty closely a Fall of Reach, but it doesn't, like the novel, but it doesn't go into the actual Fall of Reach, and it cuts off at the point when Sam kind of stays back and saves him, and helps the rest of the Blue Team escape the Covenant ship, because his like oxygen suit has been like hit, so he won't be able to survive in space.
Yeah, he takes a shot from a plasma pistol, so he can't go back into the vacuum of space. And it's a big moment for the Spartans, because apart from the augmentations, he's the first Spartan casualty in actual combat.
Yes. So it goes up to that point, and it leaves out Chief's when he meets Cortana and does that training, and then all of the things that he does on Reach, and then when they eventually leave Reach, and then it leads right into the game.
Cortana's not talked about at all in this, actually, now that I think about it.
No, this is all pre-Cortana.
Yeah.
I thought there was a mention of her. Was there not a mention of like one like kind of like they did in her like sweat or something?
No, this is all. I
think
this
that was
is
Deja.
This is about a decade before
she even starts working on her.
Cortana's not even created yet.
Yeah, this is long before that. Like, it's kind of, I think this is my biggest niggle with this whole thing, is the idea that it's called The Fall of Reach, but it ends so far.
Reach
like,
does not
this
fall.
should have just been called Halo Boot Camp. Like, that's my own.
It should have. Yeah.
My own opinion. Like, I think some people are pretty upset that it didn't cover the Fall of Reach. I think if they had have named it something like
Halo Boot Camp. Well, we already have something called Initiation, but I think Boot Camp would fit because that's actually like a chapter in the book, or like a section. It's like section 2.
Or even like Halo Birth of the Spartans, to play off the birth of a Spartan trailer and things like that. That's basically all this is. This is just the Spartans up until their first engagement with the Covenant. It's their first mission and everything they have to deal with on the way to get to that position.
Yeah, I agree. And that's I think probably the major, like you said, the major complaint, or one of them, is that it's only half-ish the story. But before we kind of get into that, I will say I really enjoyed watching it, because I kind of put it on and was just like, all right, I'm gonna just see what all the fuss is about it. That first scene when you meet John and kind of what Halsey's doing with the coin and all that kind of stuff, and she's talking with the voiceover, and like, I don't know, that really immersed me, and I really enjoyed watching it, because I've read this part of the story a few times, and I've talked about it over the years. This is something that's been around since the early 2000s, so this story has been, I don't know, well known with more knowledge.
Well, and the coin is even talked about in the Halo games. The coin is mentioned a couple times, like how she flipped the coin to see if John's actually going to be in the Spartan program.
So yeah, it was just really cool to see it. And so then after that scene, I was like, all right, cool. And so then they continued down the story. There was a lot of times where I was like, man, this is really cool. But then I was thinking like, oh, but they didn't add X, or they kind of glanced over Y. But the stuff that they included was kind of cool. And I found that, me doing that like the whole time. So then by the end of it, like, I was left like pretty satisfied. But then the more I thought about it, and I was just like, man, but it could have been like so many times better if they added X, if they added this, if they did that, or made this a little bit more canon. My overall reaction, to just kind of move this along, is that like, I enjoy it and I kind of take it for what it is, but I do think it's slightly disappointing that it could be much bigger than it actually was. But even if they renamed it and made it smaller, they still could have made it higher quality, I think. Not necessarily from an animation point of view, but from just like a canon and like source material standpoint.
I'm with you. I watched it and I enjoyed it. The animation itself is probably the best of the, like I said, it's that sort of stop motion comic animation, but it's probably the best quality version of that we've had since the terminals. Like, there's a drastic difference between the quality here and what you got in the Halo 4 terminals.
Yeah, I
appreciate that. Like, it seems like they put some effort into it. The story they do tell, I like it. There's a few little nitpicks that the lore buff in me doesn't appreciate, but I can let it slide because it's just an animated version of what we already have, and they do be a little bit selective about it. And I know 343 have come out and said they did make a few artistic decisions just for people that are coming to this that have never read the books and needed a quick initiation into the Halo universe and the history of Blue Team.
And that's another thing that you gotta kind of remember, who this is. This whole animated series is not for us. It's not for the people who read the book. It's not for the people that know everything about the universe. It's for the people who have never heard of Blue Team, and they're trying to introduce all these characters and get you to like all these characters in Halo 5. This whole thing wasn't really for the big lore buffs, which, I mean, it could have been. They could have added a couple more things that would have made it more appealing towards us. But I mean, it's more for the person who has played the games but doesn't know anything about Master Chief's background or doesn't know anything about Blue Team and that he even had a team in the first place. Since they're trying so hard to combine the lore that hasn't been spoken about, the book lore, with the game lore in Halo 5 and moving onwards, it was probably the right decision, but it's probably the name that gets us the most because it says Fall of Reach.
I think that's just where everyone stumbles on it, is it just comes back to that. I get the sort of like rock and a hard place they were caught between, you want to do something for the people coming into this that haven't really read the books and aren't terribly familiar with it. You could watch this once you bought the game on Waypoint and that each week. Like you said, they probably did make the right call going with that. Like this isn't made for us because we can sit and pick holes in it and pull through it and go, no, well, this isn't right and they didn't do this and they didn't include that. This is made for the lapsed sort of Halo fans and the people that only have like a passing knowledge of it. But I suppose down to what it actually is there anything you particularly enjoyed seeing in it or seeing done?
I definitely think what they did do right is they were able to pick out, in the section of the book they did cover, they were able to pick out all of the best moments. Like, I mean, Halsey telling John that his next mission is to survive. John getting out of the augmentation and watching the pin from the gym falling on the ground in slow motion. And they were able to pick out some of the best parts of the book and made them appealing to watch. Because, I mean, Fall of Reach is all in John's head. It's all about his personal experience with this, basically. So, I mean, it's hard to convey that into film because it's a inner monologue mostly, but they did a very good job at it.
Yeah, I think for me, probably either the fight with the ODSTs or the training mission where they have to take out the soldiers in the civilian gear and steal the Pelican. I think that's probably the best bit in it. I enjoyed that the most. And it is a little bit kind of sped through, at times it's slightly montage worthy. Like they get the Mjolnir armor and suddenly we have like a quick montage of Spartans doing Spartan-y things, and then next minute they're jumping out of a ship and they're attacking a Covenant cruiser for the first time.
It does feel a little sped
glanced
up.
over.
Yeah, I did like I kind of feel like they captured the vibe of these are truly alien and we have no idea what they are when they cover it. Like they get the transmission from Harvest and they have this kind of distorted silhouette image of a Covenant cruiser. The Spartans attack the cruiser and they get on board and they're not really sure what's happening. They cover the stuff like they get on board the Covenant ship by waiting for the shields to go down for the turrets to open fire so they can slip past them. Like they do, like you said, they do pick out most of the important best details. I think the stuff that they do leave out, minus the last half of the book, the stuff from the first half they leave out really wasn't essential to the story they needed to tell.
Yeah.
There's always just that part of me that would want to see everything in all details. I know a few people have said that the second half of the book wouldn't really work because that's adult John spending a lot of time not in armor doing things. They'll never really show us even an animated version of John not in armor.
Yeah, and also John gets to that point where he's not talkative. That's John. I mean, doing anything cinematic with John is a little boring because he doesn't actually say anything. So, I mean, if you're going from that perspective, and because the whole book, like I said, is in his head, all of the details, all of the looking at everything, he doesn't verbally say anything because everyone on his team is on the same page.
Yeah, that's something I was going to get into for my favorite moments in it. The ODST fight, I think, is probably my favorite part of the animated series and one of the best scenes in the whole book. But what I also liked that enjoyed watching that the animated short tried to do was John trying to realize kind of where the value is of the morality of things. When he's talking, like all of his conversation with Mendez is like what, like who's, like what's wasted, what isn't. And like there's a good deal of those moments throughout the book that he thinks on and contemplates on that were in his head about, and those are some of my favorite moments in just any of the books is that kind of militaristic kind of like, we got, things for the greater good or sacrifices must be made. Like those type of decisions are just so heavy and they're communicated so well in the books. And there was some of that was translated over to the animated series. And so I did enjoy those moments, but we couldn't have all of them, so to speak, as it would probably be more difficult to incorporate more and more, like Krysta, you've already been saying, since it's so much of it is just kind of in his head and judging over what he's been hearing, what he's been told, and what is himself think, what is his body and heart tell him what is right, and how does he know what's right and what's wrong. You could very easily see this if you put everything in it that you wanted. Like it could turn into a 2-3 hour sort of a show, and a lot of it would probably be far. Yeah, well, it would have been awesome for us, but I think it really would have been far too dense for anyone just coming into it. And I suppose we'll address a point that a few people really don't approve of at all, and that is the aesthetic looks they go for on a few things, with specifically armor and weapons, which I know 343 have come out and said they did it, one, to differentiate the Spartans, because we know in the books all the Spartans look identical, like from an armor wise, so you just don't know who's talking. They always ram at home, even in the books, that most people apart from Halsey can't even tell the difference in a male and a female Spartan when they're in armor, never mind pick them out individually. Yeah. Some of the weapons are the Halo 4 versions, aren't they? Like they're the modern versions. There's a BR that's the Halo 4 BR, which I thought it was kind of weird. Like not only is the Halo 4 BR and not the Halo 2 BR, but if they're making it before, like if you're supposed to watch this before the Halo 5 game, why not make the BR the Halo 5 BR? Yeah, I'm not quite sure what. But I mean, the Halo 4 and 5 BR are fairly identical except for the iron sights. So maybe that's just what it was. But yeah, I mean, the more you think about it, or if you allow yourself to think about it more and more from the perspective as someone who is unfamiliar with pretty much anything and everything outside of the novels, outside of the games, and that's their only experience with this franchise, then The Fall of Reach, I guess, succeeds in introducing who these characters are and what their relationship at least started as, and it gives someone like a good groundwork to go off on to then maybe read the books and find out how many more layers there are within Blue Team and who each of these characters are in their different adventures as they kind of split off and come back together throughout the franchise. And I think even if you didn't read another book, I think you could play the games and watch this and have a pretty good appreciation for where the Spartans have came from and who Blue Team are as people. Like, it does a reasonably good job of building them as characters. It's kind of like the Cliff Notes version of, the backstory of Halo. This is the short, abbreviated, these are the basics, these are the facts, and I think they do a good job of it. Like you said, you can poke holes in it all day long. The thing that annoys me the most isn't the fact the armor's different, because if I can slowly learn to accept nanobots, then I could accept prototype armor, but it's the fact the armor has their number stamped on it. Yeah. On the chest plate, it's the Forward Unto Dawn problem of, we need people to know who he is straight away, so here we've put his number on his chest plate, even though it wouldn't be there, and we know it isn't there, and it shouldn't be there. Yep. I suppose we've kind of poked holes in it when we said we wouldn't poke holes in it, but overall verdicts, like I said, I enjoyed it. I watched it. I've watched it a few times actually, and I watched it with my girlfriend, and quite a lot of it went over her head because she doesn't play Halo. Like, she enjoyed what she watched, although I'm not quite sure if that's a high or a low bar, because she said she enjoyed Nightfall. So interesting. That's all I'll say. Yeah, I don't know if she actually enjoyed it or she just humored me. Yeah, I mean, I'll say if you're fairly new to the extended lore of Halo, and whether you've read Fall of Reach or not, if you don't, if like that's the extent of what you've read, then I would recommend watching this, because you get to visually see what you have read, and there is some cool things with that. But if you've read, I don't know, 3 or 4 different books and at least plan on reading more, if you've been following us for a while and you haven't checked this out, you're not really missing much. I mean, it's cool to see some of those scenes, but I feel that it's hard to watch this just to look at those scenes and not think about what is missing. Like, I think it's hard. At least it's hard for me to be that objective and just watch the good moments and not think about either what is not so good or what was missing. So if you're relatively new, I'd recommend, but if you're pretty in the know, get a good idea of what's going on and able to visualize the Fall of Reach novel pretty well, then this isn't a requirement, I would say.
I think if you've read the novel, you've got the better version of the story. Like you've got the full featured version of it, but it's...
Yeah, I don't want to completely dismiss it, but I mean, I feel like it's only for certain people who are not as, I guess...
I kind of say, like, if you were going to organize it, watch Forward Unto Dawn, then watch this, then maybe watch Nightfall if you're bored, but you'll be okay without Nightfall.
Nightfall I would not recommend. I'm just going to say it.
I'd probably recommend you'd watch some of the Halo Legends stuff before Nightfall, if I'm being totally honest.
Maybe one day I'll rewatch Nightfall and see if really any of it is needed, but from what I remember, Nightfall really doesn't do a whole lot of anything.
No, I would put this up there as something, it's not must-see Halo, but maybe give it a little bit of a watch.
Yeah. I agree.
Don't like we said, don't take it as putting it down. It's good for what it is. It's just what it is won't satisfy the lore nerd inside you. At least that's how I come away thinking about it.
Yeah, I can agree. Any final thoughts for you, Krysta?
I think it's worth watching. I think it's entertaining, and that's kind of what they went for. If you're a lore nut, you gotta take it with a grain of salt, but I mean, if this is the only origin story of Halo you've ever seen, watch it. If you like it, go read the book. It's awesome. That's about it.
That's pretty much what we've been all saying, so it's, yeah.
I think that kind of sums it up. Like, there isn't a huge amount more to go into, really. Like I said, no point going through it story beat for story beat.
No, definitely. I'd rather just do a collective reading of the book.
Yeah.
We could do that.
That would actually be kind of fun.
Podcast Evolved does Halo Reach.
That'd be cool.
Or Fall of Reach.
We could each record like a chapter.
You read chapter 1?
Yeah, like you read chapter 1, then I'll read chapter 2, and then you'll read chapter 3. And we'll just put it into
and
one
then David
podcast.
Can read chapter 4, and then no one will be able to tell the difference.
Yeah, because you two are the same person,
Why
right?
did they make that Irish guy do two chapters at the same time?
He was really enthusiastic. Right, well, I think that's kind of everything then, so it's worth a watch. Enjoy it. I'd imagine anyway, if you've come to listen to this, chances are you've already seen it.
Or maybe you haven't, and we're here to say that you don't necessarily need to if you've already been... If you've been keeping up with us for a while, you know, it's on Netflix. So if you are scrolling through Netflix one day...
Yeah, if you have like an hour free, go and give it a watch. And I'd be curious if anyone out there listening to this maybe hasn't got round to reading The Fall of Reach yet, and you have watched the animated series, drop us a line on Twitter at Podcast Evolved, or head over to the group at group/Podcast Evolved, and just let us know what your thoughts on it were. It would be interesting to hear what someone not familiar with the books thought about it. With the circles we move in, everyone is very familiar with every inch of all the books.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to find someone not too familiar with it.
And then I was just going to say in general, I'd like to know what is everyone's kind of favorite depiction in the series. Like, you know, Aaron and I said that the ODST fight is definitely a highlight for us. I mean, did you guys like how they did the boot camp? Did you guys like they handled Sam's death? You guys like Mendez's kind of portrayal? Like, we'd love to hear what everyone thinks, because there is some good in this.
And I think that'll do us for this one. Just a nice short and sweet little roundup to go for the short little animation, and that'll do us then. If you're listening to this, hopefully you've also got the other book club that we were slightly late on as well. These things should come out in some sort of an order, and don't forget then to keep an eye out on your feed for next month, because I believe the next book club is Krysta
Primordium. Yeah, the end of August is Primordium.
Primordium, so that's the second book in the Forerunner trilogy, if you're not familiar with it. Highly recommend the Forerunner trilogy. Some of the best books in Halo.
That's why we're going over them.
We'll save that for next month, or for this month's book club. Which month is it? I don't know anymore.
We'll save
I've
it
lost
next.
all track. Right, well, that'll do us then for this episode, and we'll see you all again next week for another regular show. And Evolved.
Evolved.
Evolved.